Excellent. Good afternoon. Meg Ryan with the League of Cities and Towns. Thank you for coming. We have a couple brave souls here at the Trust today. Thank you guys for coming in person. No snow yet today, so that's a good thing. Hope you all are well wherever else you are. We have over 100 online. Just the normal rules of the road for Zoom. We will do a short presentation. We're honored here today to partnership with Department of Workforce Services. We have Alyssa with us, who's going to take over after myself. So we're going to do a short presentation, and then we'll have time for questions, because I know you may have lots of questions. And if you guys could use the chat box, and then we'll also monitor discussions in the room. And I just want to let you know this is the first of many trainings that we'll be doing in partnership with Department of Workforce Services, as well as Alyssa will go into more detail how she has offered to be available to you pretty much 24/7. No, not 24/7.
Not quite 24/7.
No, all right. But at least, sorry, there goes one crutch. At least, as much as she possibly can. So we'll go over that as well. Wanted to, let's see, just today, so in this short presentation, we're going to do a quick overview of the changes that were made in this legislative session. There are actually 3 bills that affect you, but the main one was House Bill 364. We'll be talking a little bit about that. You know, I think with everything, you know, you win some, you lose some. I think our goal going in this year with House Bill 364 was to clean up some of the implementation issues that we saw from the first year of this report, and these you know, menu items and figuring out who's doing what. And so I think there was, you know, we appreciate everybody, you know, doing all the work, getting this in. We appreciate DWS in helping our folks get the reports and things in, but we'll talk a little bit about the difference today that's before you. I think we did pretty much okay with this bill. There were some wins, some losses. We'll talk about those. The big thing I think I wanted to just stress, and we'll stress this throughout the presentation, is that the reporting deadline has changed. We're going to be changing the way that how that's have to necessarily go through the council or the planning commission if you so choose. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the incentives, some of the restrictions that were added this year that maybe is in the loss column, and then the resources that DWS will have for you as you move forward. So just a quick refresher, the House Bill 364 is a continuation of all the other iterations of the housing element progress that's been in effect. And for those of you, most of you, I bet, online are subject to the new sort of reporting requirements. You've gone through adopting the housing element in your first year. We look at the population numbers in order to see who qualifies to join the elite number of folks that have to comply with this regulation. Really, I think there's one, maybe, Alyssa, that may come into compliance this year. So, and I think that's Hyde Park. So if Hyde Park is in the House, congratulations. But you have kind of a different set of rules because you're kind of at the starting point where most of our folks were last year. And I know Alyssa has offered to give you some more hands-on coaching on that. But so this is a continuation. We know it applies based on population. Some counties, the 83 cities, now maybe 84 this year, based on the population. So that hasn't changed. Again, so what changed? What are the big highlights? Okay, well, we kind of cleaned up some of the language for those that are going to come into compliance, like the Hyde Parks. Kind of made it more clear from all the trials that you guys went through this year about how to make it more clear for them in that first initial stage. And then the subsequent reports that you'll be doing annually every year ongoing are now only like an administrative report. Does not need council or planning commission approval. So that means sort of like any other report you might do for a grant or for some other agency. It'll be this report, and the items are listed in the statute. Alyssa's going to go over those items and talk about that in more detail. But that's one of the big changes. The other changes, an appeal process was added So we'll talk about where that appeal can happen, at what point in the process, but that was something that was added this year, so that you have an out to have another set of eyes on the issue. The menu items stayed the same, and so that didn't change. What did change was the timeline for the report submission. And we're hoping that this timeline sticks for maybe at least 2 years. So I know and appreciate all your patience. I know that we've been back and forth on timelines. And then the kicker here this year was that a penalty was added for noncompliance. And we'll talk about, there are actually 2 of those, and we'll talk about those more in detail. So the big takeaway today is administrative report required. The due date for the report is August 1st. DWS will have the report form out by May 1st. So you'll have a few months to work on that. It's administrative. Hopefully, you'll have enough time. We'll go over the elements today to start thinking about how to capture that data, what you may report, what assistance is out there for you to capture that data. And we'll talk about what the reporting period is. There was language last year about fiscal year. Now it's the prior 12 months. That's going to, and there's also, we'll talk about ongoing activity. We'll clarify what that means for those of you that have been doing this for some time and want to be able to reflect that. And I think that's really my spiel. I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa. We're going to hop onto the chat. We've got Christina Oliver in the house, which we appreciate today, the head of the Department of Housing and Community Development for the Department of Workforce Services. So she and I will be monitoring the chat as questions come in. And if it's okay with you, Alyssa, if there are some that are relevant on a slide, we'll just interrupt you and try to get them answered that way. Totally. If not, we'll save them for the end. So thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa. Thank you guys for attending today.
Yeah. Hi, y'all. I'm Alyssa. I'm seeing some familiar faces from the last reporting year, so glad to meet in person. So I'm going to go over quickly just the difference between the initial report and the subsequent report, because we saw some additional language this year added that kind of defined these 2 items. So initial report, this will be due in your first year that a jurisdiction meets the population threshold, like Meg said. We'll reach out to communities that enter the requirement. That is, the initial report does require a general plan update, which many of you have already done. And then you do document the implementation of your strategies over 5 years. So you basically say, what am I going to do in the next 5 years? The subsequent report, in contrast, is starting annually in the 2nd year. Like Meg said, it's administrative to complete, so that should make things a little bit more straightforward for communities. And then you also document progress from the past 12 months. We're going to talk mostly about the subsequent reports because most of our communities are required to submit this type of report this year. Anyone who thinks they need to do an initial report or who has newly entered the moderate income housing program requirements, please let's just set up a meeting and we'll talk more in depth about the initial report. So there's 6 main things that you're reporting on in the subsequent report. You have your actions, so what you did in the last 12 months, any land use regulations or decisions that were made in the last 12 months. On that item, one thing you'll want to make sure you do is document how those actions actually support the implementation of your strategy. That is a requirement from the statute. And then you'll also talk about any barriers you ran into for each strategy. So the way that this might work, you know, you could say, we took a proposal to our city council as our action. They came back and said that we needed some additional work, needed some additional data, needed to do some more research. So that could potentially be a barrier. If that proposal went forward, that's what you would include under the land use regulations and decision section. So those are items that you're doing for each individual strategy. So minimum of 3 for most communities, unless you have transit requirements, then you have some more. And then if you want priority consideration, then you also have some more. But you'll do that for every strategy you're wanting to report. Then we have more of these high-level, what's going on in your city reporting items. So documenting the number of accessory dwelling units in your community from the last year. The statute asks that you include either the number of building permits or licenses to rent or other relevant data to help you, support that number, that count of accessory dwelling units. You'll also document the overall market response that your community has seen after you've been working on these strategies. And then, finally, you can also provide any recommendations to the state on what your community needs to actually implement these strategies. So this could tie back to any barriers that you're experiencing, any feedback that you receive, and there is a space for you to provide that commentary to the state. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So the question was, what's an example of documenting the market response? So your community could talk about the number of rezone applications that you've seen, or if you've had any additional, building permits requested. Those are some examples. There is also a database that we're producing that you can pull from some data. Christina also has a comment.
A great example would be if you created an overlay zone in a specific location and nobody was responding to it. That would be a great way for you to document. We put this in place. People still aren't building, 1,200, 1,400 square foot homes. They're building 4,600 square foot homes. So something to that effect.
Yeah.
There are questions online too. So
Great.
whenever you want to take a
Let's go ahead and take those now.
Was I not? Usually I'm not. All right. So, is the 12-month reporting period the last calendar year, last fiscal year, or something else? Maybe you could provide a little clarity on that.
Yeah, totally. We're just looking at the last 12 months. So basically from when you submit your report 12 months previous. We're not going to get so specific as, you were off by exactly 1 month, right? Like generally provide that commentary for the last 12.
Well,
Yes.
I think they're trying to clarify because we all just submitted.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. A lot of it's just barely submitted, and so it's kind of a resubmission 6 months in. And so do
Totally.
you still want that last 6 months prior re-reported, I guess is the question.
Yeah, and so that's actually an interesting place where the initial report wasn't really providing a report on your progress. So that's fine for you to report on activities that you may have been doing as you developed the initial report. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Okay, so you submitted an implementation schedule? Report on what you've done since approval of the report.
The first year's is a 6 month.
For all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah.
So you don't report on the 6 months?
Okay, the question was, are we requiring a report on the time during the DWS review process, which was initial report review as well as the cure process? If you weren't doing anything during that time, then no. When you're finally accepted, what we're looking for is what you finally were accepted, your implementation schedule, report on your progress on that. So that was your 2022. 2023 is going to be a little wonky. 2024, you'll have your full 12 months. I do want to make one point of clarification. We did make a change so that you could do it administratively, your progress report. But if you make a change to any of the strategies or any of your implementation schedule, that will need to go through your typical process, which your city council. Next question, Alyssa. Are you
Great.
ready?
Yeah.
Do they need to be tracking internal accessory dwelling units?
Yes, so it is internal and external units in the statute.
Okay. Christina, are you planning on covering SB 174? I sure am. That's from Shay, so that's the answer. Everybody needs to speak into the mic here. That's repeated on all the chats. I'm sorry, I'm just going through the last one.
Awesome. Okay. So we're going to talk really quickly about ongoing activities. So there was some language added about how a community could include ongoing activities only in their subsequent reports. So this does not apply to the initial report. So you must document, basically you have to do 2 steps if you want to include an action that occurred previous to the 12 months, right? Reporting period. So you have to document what that action was. So you'll include in the previous actions or legislative land use regulations and decisions, sorry. You'll document in those sections what the action was, and then you'll also have to describe to us how that action is still relevant. So the exact language is how it's relevant to making meaningful progress toward the implementation plan. So what we would expect to see would be a documentation of what are your ongoing successes? Are there any ongoing or reoccurring outcomes or outputs from this action? And what are your next steps? I'm happy if anyone has any questions about what they need to include, to meet with you individually so that we can talk through exactly what you're trying to include in the report. Sorry. Yeah.
Is it working?
Actions prior to the 12-month reporting period. Are you talking about from the previous plan? Do you know what I mean? The
Yeah,
original
yeah.
plan that we
So-
did before this new one?
So if your community has, let's say you've adopted an ordinance or a zoning overlay that's supposed to increase, moderate income housing. If you've done that and you did that 15 months ago, right? So that's outside of our 12-month reporting period. You did that 15 months ago, but you're still seeing ongoing outputs, and there are next steps that you're planning to have from that action. That's when you would be able to report it in the report. Does that make sense?
So,
Yeah, just to clarify, so the previous original plans, some of those strategies aren't the same as the new strategies, and so I wouldn't, do you want us to just report on strategies that are not part of the new element? Or is it only?
Yeah, you should only be reporting really on what's in your implementation plan. Yeah, the new one. Yeah, one. Any other questions? We good online? Great, perfect. Okay, so we're going to talk really quickly through some of the process. This should just be, you can think of this as your roadmap, looking ahead from the report due date of August 1st. So after August 1st, or after a report is submitted, HCD has 90 days to review the report, and then we will supply your community with either a notice of compliance or non-compliance. If you have a notice of compliance, great. Box checked, you're done. If you get a notice of non-compliance, you still have some additional steps in order to comply. So you now have two options if you receive a notice of noncompliance. You can either choose to cure the deficiencies in your report within 90 days, which is the same process from the 2022 reporting year. An alternative, if you choose, is to request review from an appeal board. That request must be submitted to me at HCD within 10 days of receiving your notice of noncompliance. From there, if you choose to go through the appeal process, the appeals board will review your report within 90 days, and then they'll issue a written decision either agreeing or disagreeing with HCD's notice of noncompliance. The alternative being you go through the 90-day cure period, and then you could potentially also have an appeal at the end of that 90-day cure period if we again find that there's a notice of, if we again issue a notice of noncompliance, you do have the option at the end of that to appeal. I've highlighted these three boxes. These are kind of the new steps to keep in mind. Just know that these new steps are options for you to have another set of eyes on your report, on the notice during that review period. Again, talking about process, here are some key dates. Again, please remember, like, write it down, get a sticky note, take a picture with your phone. The annual report will be available May 1st, and then it's due on August 1st. I would hate to see communities not comply because of the change in deadlines. And then this goes through some of the timelines that you can expect for each step in the process, right? So HCD has 90 days to review submitted reports. Communities can have a 90-day curing period within which you have to make any edits and resubmit to HCD. And then you can also request an appeal within 10 days. And then that appeal board has 90 days to review. Since this is new, again, I want to focus on the appeals process. 90 days to review, you absolutely have to request the appeal within 10 days of receiving your notice of noncompliance. The appeals board is made up of members appointed by the Utah League of Cities and Towns, the Utah Home Builders Association, and then the presiding member of the relevant association of governments for your community. And again, the appeals board may either agree or overturn the notice of noncompliance, and their word is final. So if they agree with HCD's notice of noncompliance, there is not an option to cure after that time. I want to talk really quickly about incentives. These are the same as last year's report, right? So if a community goes above and beyond and includes 2 or more strategies, then they're required, and all of the required elements that come with that, they are eligible for priority consideration from the Transportation Commission for TIF and TTIF funds. So if your community doesn't have any fixed guideway transit stations like TRAX or BRT, that's 5 or more strategies. If you are a community with TRAX or BRT, you have to have an additional strategy. Restrictions. So communities that either don't submit or don't correct issues identified in the notice of noncompliance are ineligible for TIF or TTIF funds. There is now a state tax commission restriction that I'm going to have Meg talk about in a minute. And then there's also SB 174 was brought up earlier, the daily fee for noncompliance. That does not start in this reporting year, just So we're all aware, that starts in 2024. And then just for your reference, items number 2 and 3 are new restrictions. Can you hold on to that question, and we'll get to all of them at the end? Meg, do you want to hop on and talk about,
So just quickly, the SB 260 deals with the local option sales tax for, and use tax for transportation. That's what we, you've heard Cameron speak before, we call it the fifth. We'll be talking about that more in depth on next Wednesday when we do the land use overview. But basically, if the county opts to, your county opts to do that provision, this is something that's been ongoing. And they renewed that. But the thing that they added this year was, if the 83 cities that are subject to the moderate income housing plan, if they are not compliant with the moderate income housing plan, then they are not eligible for that tax distribution if your county enters into that program. So that is a quick summary, but we'll go into that more further. So basically, in addition to the fee that they added, that there is also this other stick out there.
okay. And with that, I want to talk about some of our upcoming trainings and resources. We wanted to leave a lot of time for questions, just so we can have more of a conversation with all of the communities. So some upcoming trainings. I'll be at the ULCT conference in St. George in April. I'll also be presenting at the Utah APA conference, talking about the moderate income housing report. So please feel free to come ask questions, join those, join the APA session. We are also planning on hosting another training in June with communities to talk more about the new moderate income housing report. It will have been out for about a month, so hopefully communities will have the chance to get in and look at the report and come with any questions that we can help you in provide some technical assistance in filling that out. I also, if your community went through the 90-day curing period this year, I am opening up my calendar again for you all. So this link allows you to book a time on my calendar, and we can just do a one-on-one meeting if you'd like, to really talk through the specifics of what's going on in your community and what questions you might have. Some upcoming dates to keep in mind, we do have the moderate income housing database that we're expecting this summer. And then also, again, keep an eye out for May 1st. We'll be posting to our website, and I'll also send an email to everyone who submitted a report this year, our updated reporting form. Many of you will be using a completely new form as we go through the progress reporting process. Ignore. All right.
Okay, so
Yes.
all of you online, we are holding the questions. Sorry for the confusion. Hopefully you can hear us. If you can't, so we have a lot of online questions, and then we'll maybe do the in-room questions. So we're going to probably skip back and forth if you want to just go to the slide that's applicable.
Great.
I'm going to take the first one here that I have from Allie, and this is regarding the SAP. Is enhanced bus considered fixed transit? So I think rapid BRT is under that, but I don't really know what enhanced bus means. So maybe, Allie, you can give us a little more clarity on that, and we'll skip to the next one while you do that. And that's Spencer's asking us to reiterate an earlier question, which I think you touched on, but I think a lot of folks online couldn't hear. And this is in regards to reporting on the market response to our plans. If you could go back into a little more detail of what you expect and some strategies for what folks may do in order to collect that. And that is something that we added in there specifically, so that, and I think from our take, it's, so you did a rezone. You rezoned your entire area for low to moderate income housing, has anyone bid? Have developers submitted applications? So we're trying to get that other side of the story. But Alyssa, I'll turn that over to you.
No, I think that's exactly right, Meg. So if your community, has a land use regulation or decision that you've enacted, either, as you go through and report on the market response, you can say, yeah, we did this in January and it's now July and we haven't seen any takers, or, even years in the progress report each year, you can do that. So it doesn't all have to be, we want you to document your experience, right? So if you're seeing people who are moving forward after you've done those rezones, or after you've made any type of decision in your community, go ahead and document that. But if likewise, if you're not seeing anyone move on those areas.
Great, and then we'll take 2 more online, and we'll switch to in room, and then we'll go back online. This is again a clarification. Is that on? Oh, there, sorry. We'll take 2 more online, and then we'll go to some in the room. I think this is one that online missed again, perhaps because of audio issues, but this is about the reporting period. And as Christine had mentioned, this year is going to be a little wampus because all of your reports may have been deemed compliant within different dates. So some of you may have been, all you stars, October 2nd or whatever it may have been, but otherwise
I think it
November.
was still mid-November.
Okay, mid-November, November, January, February. So this year, technically, it's from whenever that report was deemed compliant. So some of you may have a short reporting period, but remember the ongoing provision. So the more the merrier. We want to kind of hear all the efforts you guys have been going to. Is that fair, Alyssa?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And just remember, if you do move forward with one of those, if you have ongoing actions, we do need to see that backup documentation from you, right? So what, how does this action remain relevant after the 12-month period? And reporting on those outputs, outcomes, and next steps if you have them.
Okay, one more. Kayla asks, what happens if you can't show progress on your strategy? So you adopted it, you did it, but you have limited staff, lack of government interest, et cetera. Is it okay as long as we identify those barriers and what the problems have been and recommit to trying to address that strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we've had pretty often. It looks like Christina's hopping on.
I'm going to save you from this one, Alyssa. So if your response is, we brought it to council and the council said no, that is not going to be something that's acceptable. We will have to say progress was not made. Is it still working? But that's why we set up the appeal board, because we have to take, as many of you understood this last year, more of a black and white approach. So the appeal board is made up of your peers, and they will be the ones to say, okay, the lack of staff we understand, because you're rural Utah, you're a certain location, you have a half planner employed because of your budget. Like, those are the types of things that we've set up this other process to address. The information that we collect at DWS is going to be pretty black and white from you. We'll work with you, of course, like we did this year. But if that, at the end of the day, is the response, we will have to say, no, you should be working with your council and planning commissions to put things forward that they would accept, is our expectation.
Yes. A question that came up when I was presenting the HTRZ to our council was, what if the state denies us HTRZ, our application? And the other question is, what if the HTRZ zones are all taken up, because there's only, for our particular station would be 8 per county, I guess. What is the scenario for compliance in those 2 situations?
I'm going to ask them, and we'll get back to you. I don't know. And it's the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. I'll get clarification from them as well. I do want to address that you brought up Ask MAG or Ask WFRC on the enhanced bus. We're going to have to get back on that question too. I'll get clarification.
Yeah, I have a question regarding something relating to the appeals process.
Yeah.
I wanted to verify something I thought I heard. When you said that, I believe that you said that if it goes to, if you appeal at like you get a non-compliance letter, and it goes to appeal, and you choose to appeal it as opposed to cure it. And what I thought I heard is that if you take that route initially, you can't go back and cure it. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Even
yeah.
if the appeals board comes back within the 90-day cure period?
Yeah, that is correct.
So, and I just make a comment, that seems a little punitive, actually, for taking an appeal, right? You're losing an option. Let's say you get the appeals process done in 45 days, and you've got 45 days left to cure. You've now lost your opportunity to get funding just because you chose to appeal a decision. It's punitive of losing that option. So it's just something to think for future adjustments to the process.
So punitive is, I guess, an interesting word. We have to read the letter of the law. This came up a lot this year, and I just want to make everyone aware we still just have to read the letter of the law. That is direct from our attorney. So we don't make the adjustments. If there are adjustments to be made, the legal need to make that in the forthcoming session. So.
I'm not questioning your interpretation.
Okay.
I'm saying that the law is structured so that. I'm not questioning how you have to interpret the law. I'm saying the law itself has the problem of having to lose, if you lose the option to cure just simply because you choose to appeal, that structure of that law is actually punitive. You're saying, oh, well, now we can't go back and exercise the right we had initially. We can't exercise the right we had initially to appeal or to cure just because we chose to appeal.
I apologize if you've covered this. I was a little late, so I'm that guy, right? You're going to have to repeat
Not at all.
yourself
Go
most
ahead.
likely. So we did our report, and but then our community does our strategic planning process January and February, working with our planning commission and our elected body, revisited our strategies, changed our strategies. Just wondering, just help us make sure we navigate that, because a couple of our strategies changed from last year in our report. Just would like to know, are we okay to just report on our new strategies? Let you know? Okay.
Yeah, so that is a question we've had come up quite a bit, and you are able to change your strategies midway through. We will ask that there is a question that will be added to the new reporting form that asks you to describe what changes occurred in your plan, in your housing element. And then we'll also ask for you to submit updated documents. So your updated general plan or moderate income housing element, an updated ordinance showing that that was adopted. And then, yes, you will, again, that is one of the situations that might make your reporting a little bit wonky, but you'll report on progress from those updates. And again, let's talk individually when you make those updates so that we can determine, when or how you would report on specific strategies if they've changed significantly.
One other quick point that's really important, if you do make a change to your strategy or an implementation piece, make sure everything is through your council by that 90-day expiration date. So
Yeah.
some people were providing us drafts at the 89th day, and unfortunately,
And
aren't compliant.
And same with the initial report, right? So if you are able, if you make those changes to your strategies, make sure that they've gone through the general plan process before you submit in, on August 1.
Hey,
Yeah.
if we thought we was winner chicken dinner, and then can you give us a heads up of the difference between the reports
Yeah.
coming up?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we've built that into the report. So if you go into one and if you go into the initial report this year and you're trying to fill it out and you actually already did it last year, our report's going to tell you, hey, you did this last year. Here's the link to the one you need to fill out. But yeah, I'll be in touch if something comes up. And then I think we take one more in the room and then go to online, Meg? Okay.
So I just want to understand, so I'm going to walk through
Yeah.
something that we had in our community last year. Had we had this in place, it would have been germane. So I think a lot of cities probably selected one of the options as zone or rezone for densities to allow for affordable housing. So we had an application that came through for a rezone to go from half-acre lot sizes to 8,000 square foot lot sizes. That was denied because the public came out in mass force and said, we don't want this. It's high-density housing in our community. And it failed. The rezone failed. But if this scenario had happened this year, now that we're on this new tract, if the council denied that rezone request and we selected that option, we would not be in compliance. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
So if that was all you reported, my understanding is yes. But if you can document, any next steps that you took to try to continue to move forward with rezoning, right? If you had that public outreach.
Sure, the next step would be to rezone for, or to do a subdivision for the exact same lot sizes of half acre as everywhere else in the local area. But this is a little bit snarky and not meant to be anything other than it's true. But on the report form, can you honestly just have check boxes under the barriers and list public outcry and elected officials? Because the public outcry happens, they don't want to do it, and then the elected officials are the next barrier. So I understand this, that when we submitted our report and selected that item, that the guidance was, if you're going to select it, you better do it. But when you have hundreds of people signing petitions and packing your council chambers out the doors and down the hallway, that's a huge barrier to overcome.
Easiest way to answer this. You're going to have to do something else. That's it. So the legislature, a larger group of individuals, that's what they're trying to overcome. And we can get into a philosophical debate later, but I'm just saying, if you simply say, I'll reiterate this, if you simply say the council said no, and that's the only thing you report, we will have to say you're non-compliant. Sure. If you say, on this project, they voted no, but this project they voted yes, then that's something we can say, they made progress in this arena, this particular one was denied. That's acceptable.
Go ahead. I also think the thing to keep in mind is that you have to be compliant on at least the minimum number of strategies. So that becomes harder when you select fewer strategies. But if you have a little bit of wiggle room, if you've selected 4, 5, 6, you do have a little bit of flexibility there, which I know may not be the answer that folks want, but it can be helpful.
Well, I think the reading on the wall, right, is what will happen when those rezones continue to fail and continue to fail. That's going to give the legislators all the data and ammunition they need to come back and say, sorry, cities, you're still not doing it, and now here is your forced higher density housing, you're welcome, right?
Can't speculate on what the legislature will do.
Yeah, some online.
Okay, we're going to take some more online here, and I've been trying to answer some as we go. But this is back to compliance issues.
Yeah.
And hold on, for some reason, I'm having an issue here. Okay, so there are two based on compliance. Let's start with the first one, which is if the city gets the first notice of noncompliance, can they both appeal within 10 days and resubmit a revised report within the 90-day cure period? Can you take both paths?
No, it's one or the other in the statute.
Okay. And then if we are unsuccessful in an appeal process, we are automatically ineligible for funding, or are we able to then go through the cure period to become compliant?
If you pursue the appeal process and the appeals board agrees with HCD's determination that the notice of non-compliance was correct, you will be ineligible for funding, and there's not the option to go back and go through the 90-day cure. However, if you choose the 90-day cure first, there is the option for an appeal after you've received your second notice of noncompliance, if it comes to that.
Okay, and then one more on that again, and then Christina wants to weigh in. It says, this is about the daily fine, the new penalty that was levied. Does the daily fine occur for the entire next year if you fail in compliance or on an appeal?
So that is something that we're still reviewing, that particular statute, since it doesn't go into effect this year. But it's something we've been talking with our team about. Christina, do you want to take it?
So we don't have clarity on it. It wasn't written with date specific, so we do have another session before those things start to, sorry, a little closer. We're all touching this like with our mouth for this one. It's very awkward. I've pronounced it. So the concept, I can illustrate a concept. The concept is you're found non-compliant. You're non-compliant until you submit your next report August 1, and then we have 90 days to review it and provide you with a yes or a no, and then, or you can go appeal, all that thing. All this, the process flow, if you wouldn't mind pulling that back up.
Yep.
But you have to pay the fine every day from the day we find you non-compliant until the next report. And we can't find you compliant until you pay off the fees. So if you have a backlog of, say, $5,000, you need to make sure you're working with your counsel to get that fee paid as soon as possible, and there may be a couple days, right? So that's the basic concept.
Unfortunately, we can't get, I don't want to get too into the details before we have a firm process lined out and lead you all astray. I know that this is a contentious and scary prospect, but once we do have that laid out, we'll schedule a similar meeting just like this, provide you all with resources and information so that we can make sure that we're providing the best information for you. I don't think it would do any of you justice for us to get too in the weeds before we have that figured out.
So just I think probably a very helpful comment, us as staff will need to really start coaching our elected officials as to determining if they are going to deny a rezone, because that's probably the most basic one all of us selected, if they're going to deny a rezone, they need to have specific findings as to why. Most of the time, we don't do findings. So coach your elected officials on, if they deny, here are our findings, and that gives us better data to report back as to why the rezone failed. So I think findings are, I mean, they've always been important, right? But now they're going to be important in a different way for us, because we're going to need to include that in our report to help understand or justify why something failed, versus now defend us in court or in an appeal.
Okay, we've got a couple more online. I'm going to condense these, and this is going back again, just more clarification on this market data.
Right.
So the question was, is it data for the state? Is it data for my community? What kind of data? And again, I think the intention was, why we tried to include this was, so let's say you just did a rezone, or you, did something to encourage the market to come to take advantage of those processes that you put in place. Have you received any applications? So we're looking at if your strategies have been, if they were one that were relevant to have some kind of implementation, if they were acted on, and if not, why? So I've had a couple questions here about, like, do we need real estate data, and it's protected in protected database? What are we looking for on this? And is it anecdotal information, or, are you looking for hard data? So I know this will be the first year on that. So I don't know, Alyssa, Christina, do you want to give any clarity, if you can, on that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely your local data, right? So, and I think that you can speak to your experience through a number of things, like people who are taking action on areas that are rezoned. It's an example that we've already given. Being able to document, like, hey, we selected strategy E and reduced restrictions for accessory dwelling units, and now we've seen, 30 new applications. Like, that is something you can definitely document under market response, right? And likewise, if you said, yeah, we reduced all these restrictions and we're still getting people saying it's too hard to do it, also could be a market response. I think you can rely on, what you see locally within your community. And if you do have hard data, go ahead and include it. I think that within this program, we have communities of varying capacity and resources. So I hesitate to make it too challenging for some of our smaller communities that are required to report. Christina, do you have anything to add? Okay.
Okay, so this is on the actual report. And again, I'm going to stress that May 1st, DWS will come out with that report form. It's going to be based on the criteria that you see on the screen that are itemized in the code, right? There was in the statute what you need to report on. And we're hoping, working with DWS to help provide some examples of what we're looking for. And one of the questions is, can we have this in a PDF copy, the finalized report format, so that we can work on and research the necessary information in support of the report?
Yeah, so the final report will have to be in the Google form, which we've been developing. I am happy to provide the report questions in a hard copy so that you can prepare that before you go in to fill out the actual report. If there's other reporting feedback, you are more than welcome to send that to me, as we're going to be developing this every year. But yeah, at this point, the report will be in a Google form again, but I can definitely make hard copies available so that you can reference it before you're actually in the throes of filling out the report.
Well, I think, although I may get a slew more of chats here, I think we've tried to answer everything in the chat. Any more in the room or any other things? Anyone want to tell me when the report's due this year? August 1st, that's the big takeaway. And hopefully we'll have plenty of time to walk through that. Any other questions online or in the room? Some
Yeah.
more in the room. We'll give it over here.
Well, this is just more of a comment, thank you for having this meeting today. Thank you for being willing to have these difficult conversations. I know this is more a mandate on your group to be able to enforce this and a requirement on that end. So, it's kind of a difficult thing and appreciate, the productive dialogue and helping us all get into compliance. And especially last year with the assistance, I felt like it was really a positive thing to work through. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so I'll also be emailing everyone a copy of the link so that you can schedule to meet one-on-one with me if you'd like. Sorry, this slide just takes a while. So that's available to you through August 1st. So you can I found that that's easier than playing the good old chess game of when is everyone available. If you have any other questions, you're of course more than welcome to just contact me directly. If there's someone new at your community who's taking over completing this report, please have them get in touch with me, pass on their contact info so that I can make sure I'm talking to the right person. Sending them all of the moderate income housing emails so you can have a break. All right, any other questions?
So just one more, again, on this market response, which I think will be
Yeah.
our one. And we will publish a
Love it.
frequently, I can't say it, ask questions, little attachment. On our website, we will have this Zoom recording. We'll have the little white paper, the summary that I've dropped in the chat, and it's also available here in person on these bills. And we'll also try to put that frequently asked question there on the league website as soon as we gather that all. But Rhoda up in Park City, hello, and she's again asking, what if our strategies don't really relate to a market response? In other words, we built a senior housing center. So I guess, not all of the menu strategies maybe apply, but in that case, I would certainly say we built it, and we had full occupancy and we had 79 million on the waiting list or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're going to have to kind of use your judgment based on the strategy that you issued there. So, okay, last call right now, online and in person. And you've got office hours. We're going to do this again at our conference at spring, and then again at APA. Alyssa will be there. Again, we'll do this on June 7th. So we're trying to make ourselves as available as possible to try to help you work through this. Here's Christina.
Sorry, one question came from the audience that I think everybody would benefit from the answer. If you are a city that's only required to select 3 strategies, but you select 6, and your progress report comes back, and you've only made progress on 3 of those strategies, not on all of them, we're going to hold you to the bare minimum. So we will look at the 3 that you've made progress on. You don't have to make progress on all 6 if you can't. That's okay. So the 3 will be the ones that will say, they did make progress, they're in compliance, move forward. Now that the reason you're doing the additional ones is for that, the ranking in your transportation funding.
Just some clarity on what you just said. Not all the strategies start year 1 or 2?
Yeah.
So if there's no progress, that's okay, right?
Where you're going to have something. You have to do something. You can't just say, I'm going to do nothing for 2 years. In 2026, we're going to do a public meeting. There has to be something.
So part of that would probably be, and I'm guessing you're in the same boat as I am, we have limited staffing. So that's why we put that particular strategy out in year 2024, because we felt like we could get these other ones worked on. And so if you would list that as a barrier for why maybe you didn't start early on it, or why we listed it with a timeline that was pushed out.
So we just, on every strategy, we have to have some sort of a progress, like, okay.
You have to show something. To get credit, you have to show progress. Even you need to make progress.
So that progress could be data gathering, research. So spend a few hours, minutes Googling, but gathering relevant information for whatever we listed out in 2024, and say that we have done some preliminary work with research. I mean, I'm not saying like really don't do 2 minutes, but like this morning I was researching information on scenic byways and signage for scenic byways. So we could list that we've, pulled best practice ordinances. We're getting a no.
If I go to the legislature and say, they're looking at stuff, we're going back to the previous bill, the pre-HB 462 bill. Now all the bills are getting jumbled in my brain. But that was what was happening. We looked at stuff, we considered things, and that wasn't acceptable. So I would caution that you're putting that out there on the public website. This is your opportunity to tell the story of what's happening in your communities based on market response. All these terms are really just us and the legislature saying what barriers are occurring region-wide or statewide. Like are there constants? Are there variables that we need to address? That's what they're looking for. But I will caution you, if you put things that are fluffy and aren't something that others would look at and say, yeah, they're making an effort to push this forward, then that's not going to play out well. Not with Christina.
So one of the things that, like, I'm looking specifically at our moderate income housing plan, and like one of my action plans that was approved was that we'll amend our AD ordinance, right, by December 31st of 2023. So just looking in the future, in the next one, what does that look like? I've completed, then do I completely redo the whole thing all over again and put in a new strategy that is different than that one? Because once we do it, it's done, and then the next reporting year, so that's something that I think the legislature needs to look at next year, is that what happens when year one is done? Because I laid mine out over a 5-year time frame of what I was doing each one. So it makes it really difficult to report on every one every year, at least going forward. So anyway.
Kind of a concern with that. It's still not clear to me because our action plans were approved. So, in the timelines. So if there's nothing to report on an approved timeline, then, yeah. Like year 1, it's done. Year 2, 3, 4, 5, there's nothing to report on. But that was already approved. So.
I don't know yours off the top of my head, so I can't address your specific circumstance. But you bring up a good point. We've had a lot of discussions. This will continue. I can promise there will be continuous change. Hopefully not in the deadlines. We're going to stick with those. Sometimes the changes are surprises to us. So we get what we get, and then we try and work on finessing it every year. But you're right, that is a very proper question, one that I don't have an answer to.
I also think in some ways there's the ongoing item, which I can navigate back to it, right? If you were able to implement an action or adopt an ordinance that approve a land use application, if you invested in a project, if your city did, and it continues to, you did that in year 1, but in year 2, 3, 4, you continue to see outputs from it, that is also one way that you can look at including that.
So I won't.
Well, look at a rezone, for example. So a rezone in 2024, if that was one of your strategies, say your council approves a rezone in 2024, and that meets your strategy, and then the next year they rezone another property, et cetera. Those are the things you're going to be reporting on.
Yeah.
Okay, so online, and I think it follows the vein if you've been able to hear this conversation in the room. And again, remember there are office hours, but let's see if we can get some clarity on this. And so there's some chatter about we're getting mixed messages about the implementation and the reporting. And it's a 5-year horizon, 5-year period. So maybe we take an example of one and try to walk through, like some are saying, well, if we did everything in the first year, we kind of had that addressed. You report on what progress or how it was implemented, or did it not work, or did it work? And then if it didn't work, maybe you revisit that, right? And pick something that works. But, and so I want us to be clear, if you set a strategy for the future year, which was deemed compliant, it says now, do we have to change that and show progress? My answer, and I'll let you answer, would be that you show the progress on how you're getting to implement that in the future years. So if you said in 2 years, we will have adopted a ADU all for all ordinance. What are you doing this year? What are you doing next year? How are you working on that? So everyone's menu strategy, and that was part of the flexibility that was tried to be built into this so that you had some kind of local determination of what worked for your community. Everyone's strategy off that list may be a little different. So easier ones like a rezone are easier to quantify. Some of the other ones may be a little more nebulous. But again, Alyssa's going to have office hours to answer each of those individual questions. I think from the league standpoint, what we're going to be able to try to deliver is some kind of continuing show of data. We've shown all the building permit issues. We've shown all the work cities are doing. And we're trying to use this data to show even more that you are doing what you can do within your wheelhouse. And that's why it's important to try to get some of this information. And then, what happens in 5 years? Well, if we're all still here and we still have this ordinance, we'll figure it out then. And I don't mean to be trite, it's just that this is such a moving target with the legislature, and our big ask from the league has been give us time to implement this and figure it out. So we're still trying to have that message heard. I think we will also have a session on April 5th that will talk more about the legislative outcomes this year with Cameron and Carson and some of our legislative team that were up there slugging it out on the Hill. And if we have any more information that might help you with your local councils, that was one of the questions, let us know. We have that white paper that may be useful to show your council members. We'll be repeating all these updates for the next coming months. And Gardner data, do you guys want to just touch on that, Christina or Alyssa, about when that might come and how that might help as another resource?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are developing a database with the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute, and that is expected this summer. So unfortunately, with the date and deadline changes, it doesn't quite line up completely, but that will provide city and county-specific data that you can use in your reports, you can use in your community planning. It's certainly not a requirement for us that you pull it over, but it's available so that you can better understand the supply, demand, and the local need for moderate income housing, so that housing that's 80% of the area median income and lower. So we should have that database in the summer, and then some subsequent reports from them that we'll share with everyone once they're completed throughout the end of the year. So we're really excited for that. We think it will be a good source of data that you can pull that's specific for your city to really demonstrate what's going on.
Yeah, great. I think we've exhausted online. Again, we'll be doing this often. Thank you all for your time and for your patience as we navigate this, and for the efforts that you do. We realize the work that this takes, and we certainly appreciate it at the League. So, and thank you for our partners at DWS for working with us, trying to navigate this through and keeping a good relationship. So with that, we'll sign off, and thank you all again for your time.